this is the more advanced look at ScrollSlider. I want to show you how it works on the sort of in the code, as it were, so that if you understand how it's actually working, you can think about how you're going to put it together to get the effects you want on the front end. And I'll show you just one neat trick which can help you make the horizontal slider, I don't know, that bit more interesting to look at. It just kind of offers you a bunch more effects you can use if you just have this kind of little bit of cleverness thrown in. So let's crack on. This is just some example stuff. I've got a section. They're all just sections. They're all half height. Nothing special done about them, and they're all in horrible colors because this is not a design class. This is a let's make it really obvious what we're looking at. So we're looking at a section, a horizontal slider, two sections, a horizontal slider. And on the help pages and whatnot, I've said keep two sections between your sliders so that there's room, and this is why. Okay, so pretending we're going to have a look at the front end, but actually I'm just going to explain what's going on. When the horizontal slider builds itself on the front end, it does this. So now let's just grab our screenshot. So this is effectively what's happening on the front end. ScrollSlider, in this case 270, is going to find the section before and the section after itself and is going to wrap it in this container. And it does this so that GSAP can stop the section here and the section here. It stops the content here disappearing up the screen as you scroll, and the content here disappearing down the screen as you scroll. So it kind of just clamps it all together. And if we have a quick look, you can see this. We've got our half-height horizontal scrollers. So remembering that we are wrapping around the container before and after our horizontal slider, and now we'll see why we're doing that, just to make it even more obvious. Let's stick a meaningless heading in there and another meaningless heading in there. Okay, so we'll save that and we'll go and have a look at the front end, and I'll show you why it's doing that. So it's grabbed hold of this section, it's grabbed hold of this section, and it's going to stop them going anywhere. So you see I've got it in stack mode, it's sliding up, and our sections stay where they are. Now, because I've got them slightly smaller than I might want them, you can see this nice blank space here. This is why we are wrapping our top section and our bottom section, because if I continue to scroll to the end, do you notice at the bottom our orange section catches up? That is the content scrolling into place. So let me just drag this back in again. In order to give us room to horizontally scroll, GSAP adds a lot of space underneath the section. So let's say we didn't bother wrapping in this outside container, we just had our scroll slider. You would have a huge amount of space here, right the way down the screen, to give you room, so you can see our scroll bar moving up and down. Even though vertically our screen isn't moving, you can see the scroll bar is moving up and down. It has to have that pretend room, for want of a better expression, to move in so that it can do the horizontal scrolling while faking the vertical scroll. So in order to get that fake space, it literally adds a huge amount of space, and you can't see it because normally, and I'll just show you how I would normally do it, with our half height scroll slider here, what I would normally do is say, okay, the scroll slider is half the height, so let's make it stick, let's make it stick at 25% from the top. And then when you look at it on the front end, when it sticks, you can't see the orange section underneath, and you can't see that the orange section slides up because it's off screen. But what you cannot see down here is a huge amount of blank space because it's off screen. So that's how we get away with creating what's called pin spacing, a huge amount of pretend space that we can scroll in and out of so that the horizontal work, or in this case the stacking work, can happen while none of the content around it appears to move. Okay, so one more time for those at the back. this red box represents the wrapper that the horizontal scroll slider creates around the outside of the previous and next section. So if we just show you why it's important to have two sections between, can you imagine? If we've got two scroll sliders next to each other, scroll slider 219 is trying to wrap around 167 and 249. So it's trying to create this box here, but then 249 is trying to wrap a box around 219 and 171, and these boxes are colliding with each other, so it can't wrap properly, it can't pin properly, and it literally just doesn't know what to do with itself, falls apart completely. And I will just show you so that it's clear what I'm talking about. Just can't stop doing that. Off you go. Thank you. Off you go. So let's take our scroll sliders and put them next to each other. These are just, I literally have just copied this scroll slider, so they've got exactly the same settings. Except I think that now that I've changed this to 25% and I haven't changed this one, doesn't really matter because they're going to fall apart anyway. So let's just on the front end. Now, you can't see it, but I think it's already pretty obvious. This slider is trying to wrap around, this slider is trying to wrap around a content that this is already wrapping around, and so on and so on and so on. It's basically wrapception, and it can't cope. So while this one sticks okay, boom, it immediately then falls completely to pieces because it doesn't know what it's supposed to be sticking. It can't wrap itself around properly. Dreadful mess. If you see this kind of dreadful mess, it is because you haven't put two sections minimum, two sections, between one scroll slider and another. However, that's all the stuff I'm going to say about the wrapper and why it's there per se. Now we're going to look at a situation where you say, yeah, but I want two scroll sliders because I want to do fancy stuff. It's like, that's okay, because Smithy got your back and all that. I have enabled you to disable the need for this spacing, and I'll show you how and why that might work. So we put the second scroll slider immediately after the first because we want to do clever things with it. But we now need to make sure that the wrapper doesn't fall over itself. So we're going to say, actually, let's not wrap this at all. So if I go to my scroll slider and my other settings where it says, don't be doing this if you don't know what you're doing, I'm going to say, I don't want to wrap this slider. And I'm going to go to my next scroll slider and I'm going to say, I don't want to wrap you either. Now, this slider is told to stick at 25%. So that would be about here to keep it in the middle. I'm going to change that to 0% so it sticks at the top, which gives us half a screen. This is also, if we just have a quick look, size, there we are. Oh, I'm on the slider, not the slider. There we go. And this one is, as you can see, 50 viewport height as well. So these are both the same height. And therefore, if we take our second scroll slider and we stick that to 50%, that will be halfway up the screen and they will look very much like they do now and take up the whole screen. So, just to remind you, we've got two scroll sliders and what we've done is we've switched the wrapping off for both of them. But we've left the spacing in for both of them. Therefore, we're not quite going to work yet, but I want to show you it not quite working, again, just to get the idea of why we're doing what we're doing. So, this is our first slider, stopping perfectly at the top, but we've now got all of this pin spacing, this artificial space, which you can see finishes exactly when the slider finishes. And now, because we have spacing for our second, we're going to disappear off the top, and it all looks a bit clunky and a bit pants. So, not only do we want to get rid of the wrapper so that we can have two together, but we want to make sure that they come in together and they leave together. So, really important, you need to set up both of your scroll sliders so that they take the same amount of time to complete their horizontal scroll. Which sounds like, oh no, how am I going to do that? But I mean, it just basically means whatever settings you've got here for your scroll method. So we've got for our scroll speed, our ease time and buffer, whatever you've got in there, along with the scroll type that you're using, make sure they're the same for both sliders. Now, Don't have to be exactly the same. You can actually make one standard and one reverse, and I'll show you why that might be quite nice. Let's in fact do it. Let's make the bottom one reverse, and let's make the top one go in a standard direction. So we now have a forward and a backward scroll slider. If I save that, now we've still got the spacing issue. So we say, okay, I don't want any space between this and this. I don't want these two scroll sliders to have any space between. So actually, if I go to the first scroll slider and I say, actually with you, I don't want any spacing either. Now we can get away with this because the amount of time it takes for both of these to scroll is exactly the same. Therefore, the amount of space that's going to be inserted underneath this second slider is the right amount of space for both of these sliders to complete their journey. I'm sure there's an infographic I could create to explain that in English, but you're just going to have to bear with it. As just a reminder, when you create horizontal movement, you have to have vertical space in which to move the page so that your horizontal movement can take place. That's the artificial space that is added into the page by GSAP when it locks this in place. That is the space that we're going to switch off only for the first slider. So I'm going to say that, go to the front end. Now when I refresh, I've got one sticking at the top of the screen, one sticking at the bottom of the screen, and as I scroll, because I've made one forwards and one reverse, we get this nice little effect. Now, I haven't done it here, but what you can do, for example, is you can cut this image in half, and you can cut this image in half, and then when they meet in the middle like this, they make a whole image, and that can be quite effective. I haven't done it with this because I'm going to show you how to do that in a slightly different way, but trust me, it can be quite good fun. So, you can have two sliders, and you can have them behaving slightly differently, but it's really important that they take the same amount of time to go from the beginning to the end of their scroll. If I added one more slide into here, I now need 4 times vertical in order to complete my scroll. I need 3 times vertical in order to complete my scroll. So we'll have a look at the front end just to emphasize. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and you can see it's going over the top because it needed more space. So if they're not timed the same, they're gonna kind of go weird and wrong. Okay, so make sure you have the same number of slides and the same settings for things like your scroll speed and your ease time. They need to be exactly synchronized. If you have 5 images attached as a gallery to your first slider, you need 5 images attached to your next slider, or you need to be an incredibly good mathematician in order to work out how much space to pop in there. Now, what I'm going to show you now is just a little trick which I think is quite nice. I mean, you've already got the idea, I hope, that by having 2 sliders together, when they work, you can have this lovely little meet up in the middle effect if you have half the image here and half the image here. I'm going to show you how you can create another interesting and nice effect, which I hope will make it clear why we're sticking these 2 sliders together and the extra nice bits and bobs you can have with them. So, scroll slider number 1. What we're going to do is we're going to have the stack effect. So, stacking effect for scroll slider number 1. Scroll slider number 2, we're also going to have the stacking effect. Okay, it's not very exciting so far, but our little ease time here, I'm going to set that to, let's say, 800, so it's nice and smooth. And if I'm going to do that, then as I say, I will have to come here and I'll have to set that to 800 as well. Not going to mess about with too much else, but we now have 2 scroll sliders, both set up to be 800 milliseconds for easing, and they're both set up to be stack. So I'm going to come to my first slider here, and I'm going to say, for my first lot of slides, we've got stack direction up. And then if I go here, I've set it to up on all of them just to save us a bit of time. So on our second slider, let's see if you can guess, we're going to set it to down. So second slider, all of our stack directions are going to be down. There we go. So all our settings are the same, but one is stacking up, one is stacking down, same number of slides, everything else otherwise is exactly the same as it should be. Now, you can use half an image, and you'll understand why when we flip over and have a look at the front end. But you can also, since it's going to be loading the same 3 images for both of these sliders, your caching and your prefetch should take care of that. It should fetch the images once and use them twice. So there's no massive amount of harm done. And I'm also too lazy to go cut the images in half. So for our top slider, we're going to stick the image to the top of the slide, and we're going to set a custom size, which is going to hopefully again make sense in a moment. So center top, and then custom size, and the custom size is we're going to have it cover the full width of our slider, but we're going to have it be 100 viewport height. So just bear with me while I do that with all the others. So here we're going to take our background image, we're going to make it custom size, 100% wide, and 100 viewport height. Did I do viewport height? I'm making myself go mad here now. Did I put viewport? I did. There. And last, this one, background image settings, background custom, 100%, so it covers the full width of the item no matter what, and 100 viewport height, so that we only get the top half of the image, because our container is 50 viewport height, but our image is 100, so it will neatly cut off. Going to our second scroll slider now, we're going to kind of do the opposite. So the image settings size is going to be the same, custom size, 100% by 100 viewport height, but this time our position is going to be sticking to the center and the bottom. And I hope you're beginning to see why we're doing this. Scroll slider number 2, image settings, size, custom, 100%, 100 viewport height, and position in the center bottom. Last but not least, I'm going to take image settings, custom size, width 100%, and 100 viewport height, and position center bottom. Now let's just save what we've done there and go to the front and see what we're doing. So here we go. This is our slider now. I've done them the wrong way around. Excellent, excellent. Okay, but you can see here we have a full image, but because I got the first one the right way around. There you go. And now we're opening out, and because I've set the sizes wrong, but you get the idea. I will fix that if I can remember how to do it. Because look, I only found this out a little while ago, and I thought that's really lovely. I'm going to have to make that work. And center bottom and center top. Yeah, center bottom. Let me say center bottom. Okay, just going to go away and find out what's going on here. So at all, I haven't set the position to center top for our image. I don't know how I managed to not do that, but there you go. It's a gift. Position center top. There you go. Let's save that. I'm a bit sad and disappointed now because the grand reveal is slightly spoiled by the teaser content. But anyway, now you have what looks like a full image, but we know is actually in 2 halves. And then when you scroll down, you get this lovely little open up effect. So it's quite a nice, neat little effect, and it's just created by being able to control 2 sliders at once. And as we saw before, you can have them wrap in a different direction. So let's go to our scroll slider here. Now, if we don't give the scroll slider, let's go onto the slider itself, and scroll type stack left unless you select a different option from the slide itself. Brilliant then. Well, let's go to our slide itself, And we can get rid of the stack direction knowing now that it will be left. Go, stack direction will be left, empty is left. And then go to our second scroll slider, and now we have to set the direction to right. Set the direction on our scroll slider to right. And last but not least, see if you can guess. There you go. So now let's save that. Go to the front end and refresh the page. There we go. And now we have it meeting in the middle like that. So it doesn't take too long once you get the hang of what we're doing here. But I will just reiterate what we've done in order to make this work is we've said to GSAP, okay, I don't want you to wrap these two sliders. We've gone to our advanced settings down here that give you all these warnings, and we said I don't want you to make a wrapper around it, and I don't want you to add spacing to the first one. And then the second scroll slider, we've said I don't want you to wrap, but yes, add spacing. Now because these are both exactly the same size with exactly the same settings, although like we've seen, not exactly the same because one's sliding left and right, but they take exactly the same amount of time to complete. So it's fine, you don't have to put spacing in. You can get these kind of dual effects where you get mirrored images, or they scroll left and right, or you could put heading content in here, or you could put words on the actual image so that when they meet in the middle, the words come together in the middle, so on and so forth. Just gives you that little bit more scope and flexibility for different effects. I will just finish by saying you can do this manually if you like. Let's say you want 3 here, but you want 5 here, and therefore you, as Einstein's second cousin, happen to be amazing at maths and have a calculator with you, and you work out that you need exactly 3,428 pixels of scroll or whatever. You can put that space in manually. Now, I'm not going to promise that I can time things perfectly with different sections of different sizes and whatnot, but I'll show you what I mean. So if I turn the spacing off for both of these items now, no spacing at all, it'll show you that when we don't add the artificial spacing in, things turn into a bit of a mess because our bottom spacing comes up way before it should because we haven't added any spacing in. Okay, but you might say, well, actually, this little roll over the top effect, oh, I quite like it. What I want is for my content to come in just before the end of the horizontal movement or whatever. Anyway, you can choose to do with this exciting knowledge what you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the heading. In fact, I'll just chuck that one up there. Right, so we've got now a blank section. Now I'm going to make sure that it is not quite blank so that we can really see what's going on. So we've got this kind of semi-transparent green going on that we're going to see. But I want you just to remember that actually all we need to do is set this as blank space, okay? And we won't be seeing it because it's blank space. Now, I have 3 slides each here, and because I am not Einstein's cousin, or even his third cousin 7 times removed, I'm going to keep the maths simple. So we say, okay, we've got a section here, and we want this section to give us enough vertical room for these sliders to make their full progress from beginning to end, full progress being 300 viewport width. Hooray, because there's 3 sections and they're 100 viewport width. So that makes my life nice and easy. My custom height is 300 viewport width. So now you can see if I go in breakdowns, I've got this enormous section with nothing going on. Okay, and I say, that's great, thanks. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to see what we would get on the front end by refreshing our page. And here we go. Now we have 2 sliders. Now you see the green space. You wouldn't see this obviously because it would be transparent, but I've left it green so you can see that our pretend space is moving while our horizontal section is moving. And at just the right moment, we've completed 300. There is the rest of our content. I think I've miscalculated, but I think I've got too much. Oh yes, I only need 200. I'll tell you about that. But you get the idea. If you want to put your artificial space in, or you don't have to have artificial space. Let me try and explain things one at a time. Sorry, I get dreadfully excited and carried away. The reason why there's too much space here is because obviously this section, the first section scrolls up, boom, like that, before we pin. So this section has already happened. We don't actually need to put space in for that. So here we only needed 200 viewport width, because that's only this slide and this slide are actually going to be sliding. Let me just save that, show what I mean before I explain the second part. So we only needed 200, my mistake. So let's watch our 200 viewport width spacing, which is light green but would obviously be transparent, I say again. And you might want to put pointer events and none on it if you've got buttons under here. As we complete our task, you can see the scroll bar now, and here we are, perfectly aligned. You couldn't see it on screen, but the purple is way off screen and then just meets just in time that visually we don't see it. So there you go, 200 viewport width, because that doesn't need any. Now we're pinned and we move 100 viewport width, we move 200 viewport width, and then our content comes in. Okay, so as I say, this doesn't have to be blank either. What we could do, and this is just ugly and not very planned, but if I just get rid of the content for our sections here, the second useful sneaky purpose of having your own space or setting your own space, we've got the custom height of 200 viewport width. We could put a semi-transparent image, we could put text, we could put other content in here. I really should do this better, I know, and you can come along later and have me shot for being lazy. But if we go to this layout and let's just put, what we're doing, gap 50 viewport height as our gap, and then we've now got 3 headings along in our space. Let's jab another one in there. I think that makes us evenly spaced out. So when we save this now and we look at it on the front end again, remember, in fact, let's get rid of the green. You'll really see what I mean by that. Let's get rid of the background. It's fully transparent. That's how it should be. Save that and refresh the page. We now have our first section, and as you can see, our other section scrolling in, we've now got a heading talking about this stuff. Now obviously I would time this more effectively, and I would have my heading arrive where I wanted it, when I wanted it. I would just phone up Einstein's cousin and say, how do I plan this so it's exactly in the right place? But you can see the third headline, if I'd made the gap between them 100 viewport, if I'd made the gap between them 50 viewport width instead of height, then the timing would have been bang on. But you get the idea. You can have images, you can have text, you can have whatever you like. And once you understand how the wrapping and the spacing works, it means that you've got a more flexible content. You can have a horizontally moving couple of sections while you have vertically moving text. And again, obviously, you don't have to have that design. We can go into our scroll slider and we can say, I'm going to have this as the vertical wipe. Second scroll slider, I'm going to set that also to, shall we set, I don't know, I'm just interested what happens with the wipe in the other direction. I think this could look awful, but why not? Why not? Let's have a look at it. And then we've got sections moving vertically. Yeah, you see the timing is different because it has to scroll in a different direction. So this is why we need to keep our timing exactly right. So in this one, I'll stick the vertical wipe on as well. Our timing is now the same. It's going to be a bit short, vertical wipe with a half height section, not particularly good. But now that I've put them both in, oh yes, no. So we need different spacing and heights and whatnot, because the vertical wipe, in brief, vertical wipe overlaps all sections by 50%, which means that 3 sections takes about 175% of the amount of time it's supposed to. And this is why use your wrapping and spacing with care, because you just have to know, you have to get your timings right, everything else. It will work fine if I put the horizontal wipe on. No, it won't. No, because horizontal wipe, again, they overlap by 50%. So I need to work out how much less spacing I need to put in before things work, and so on. So it's all just, my head starts to melt. I'm not a mathematician. I think the fact that I got any code to work is a miracle. I'm only kidding. I do. But yeah, you can see it's incredibly hard to time and understand how the spacing is going to work if you start switching things around. I have only messed about with using the standard scroll type and reverse scroll type, or the stacking, because they're a bit more predictable. The wipe is like, you have to do percentages, it does my nut in. So I think if we set one to stack and one to vertical, we can do it. But again, I don't want to promise with a gun to my head, but there you go. So one of them is stack, and one of them is normal wipe, which kind of looks a bit weird, but kind of odd and nice at the same time. Yes, so let me finish that peculiar wander off with a repeat of the fact that this is what our scroll wrapping is doing, or trying to do, when you set up your horizontal slider. So in the good place, it wraps the section above and the section below so that it can hold all of this content together, and you don't get content flying in or flying out, as you've now seen when I tried the vertical wipe and the horizontal wipe, which was not the right idea. You saw the content flying in or flying out and all the spacing. It's very ugly. So it wraps it around to clamp it in place. But if you want to have two sliders next to each other, you're going to have to turn the wrapping off, and I strongly recommend that the two sliders take up the full vertical height, because otherwise, if you don't wrap them and you don't have the spacing in, you can have content look like it's flying off. So first of all, that's the wrapping, and the second is to remember the spacing in order to give us enough distance vertically for us to scroll horizontally. GSAP is going to shove a load of artificial space under here that we can scroll into, and that is why your content looks like it's flying in, because this huge space is added. And you can turn that space off in order to have two sliders together, but make sure you turn the spacing off for the first one, but leave it on for the second one, so that there's still enough vertical room to scroll into, and then make sure the timing on both is exactly the same. So hopefully by the 37th time you've watched that video, it'll all make sense. But that's just a couple of examples of advanced use of the slider to get that extra bit of effect or interest out of your page if you want to use it. Hope that's proved helpful. As ever, any questions, drop me an email or message me on Facebook, and enjoy your nonsensing around with your websites. I think.